In 1962, hundreds of schoolchildren in East Africa began laughing and could not stop. Fits erupted without warning, and, in some cases, continued for as long as 16 days. Teachers watched their classrooms unravel. Families listened helplessly as giggles turned to sobs and back again. The strange wave shuttered schools, spilled from village to village, and baffled doctors who could find no germ to blame. It looked like joy from a distance. Up close, it was something else entirely. The laughter wasn't funny at all. It closed 14 schools, disrupted daily life across 100 miles, and left a young nation shaken. This is the Tanganyika laughter epidemic. On paper, it reads like a prank gone out of control. In reality, it's one of the most striking examples of mass psychogenic illness ever recorded. The stakes are bigger than a medical curiosity. Was this a virus no one could find? Was it a curse whispered by elders? Or was it something stranger and far more revealing? A psychological pandemic sparked by stress, amplified by social contagion, and written onto young bodies during a turbulent historical moment. We're going to follow the outbreak from its first giggles to its last echoes, weigh what doctors found, examine what culture concealed, and ask what it means for an age where contagion can be emotional and the vector can be a screen. The setting is Tanganyika, January 1962, weeks after the country's independence from Britain on December 9th of the previous year. The political air is electric and uncertain. New flags fly, old rules dissolve. A generation raised in colonial schools now carries the pressure of building a nation. The first known cases appear not in a crowded capital, but at a mission-run girls' boarding school in Kashasha, near the western shore of Lake Victoria. 159 pupils, most between 12 and 18, share dormitories, mess halls, strict schedules, and the kind of intense social proximity that turns whispers into weather. Teachers impose discipline and high expectations. Students navigate the delicate space between village life and European-style classrooms. In the background, traditional beliefs about spirits and the unseen sit alongside sermons and school rules. It is in this tight crucible of adolescence, faith, and post-colonial pressure that the outbreak lights its first match. This epidemic did not begin with a crowd. It began with 3 girls. On January 30th and 31st, 3 pupils in Kashasha erupt into laughter they cannot stop. It isn't the levity of a shared joke. It is compulsive, involuntary, and unnerving. Within days, the count swells. Dozens of classmates seize with the same fits. Teachers try prayer, discipline, and rest. Nothing works. By mid-February, 95 of the school's 159 pupils are affected. Episodes oscillate between hysterical giggling and sudden sobbing. Some girls faint, others hyperventilate. A few develop rashes or clutch their stomachs with cramping pain. Lessons disintegrate as teachers watch the classroom turn into a wave pool of nervous systems, one girl's collapse rippling into another's. In the staff room, the question hangs in the air. What can possibly be done when laughter itself has become a symptom? The administration holds out for order, then concedes the obvious. On March 18th, the school closes its doors. Sending students home scatters the embers, and the countryside begins to glow. In April and May, fits appear in nearby villages, most notably in Nshamba, roughly 55 miles west of Kashasha. Over the course of about a month, 217 villagers, overwhelmingly adolescents, fall into episodes of uncontrollable laughter, mixed with tears, fainting, and breathlessness. Neighbors describe children collapsing at mealtime, teenagers who cannot keep food down, families who sit through the night listening for the next attack. By late May, Kashasha reopens, only to be hit by a second wave. Another 50-plus girls succumb in the weeks that follow. The school closes again by the end of June. In the same month, Ramashenya, another girls' middle school, reports nearly 50 affected students. Smaller flares follow across the region through late 1962 and into 1963. At the peak, 14 schools shutter operations, and normal life in a 100-mile radius around Bukoba slows to a crawl. When the epidemic finally peters out in mid-1963, roughly 18 months after the first cases, estimates suggest about 1,000 people have been touched by the phenomenon. By the time the laughter ends, it has paralyzed an entire region for nearly 2 years. From a distance, laughter is contagious and charming. Up close, these episodes feel like drowning. A girl doubles over, gasping for air between bursts of giggles she cannot silence. Her eyes are wet, not with mirth, but with fear. Minutes pass, then hours. Her abdomen aches, her throat burns. She tries to will her body to calm, it refuses. She falls asleep exhausted and wakes to a new wave. Another student sits rigid on her cot, shaking with a laugh-cry rhythm that has its own terrible momentum. Fainting spells follow, a fall to the floor, a brief blackout, the shame of coming to with classmates hovering. In some households, older relatives whisper about spirits. In others, parents hide their panic behind firm voices. For those caught in it, this is not joy. It is a loss of control. Think of the way a yawn moves through a room, one face tugging a dozen more. Now magnify that reflex until it becomes days of compulsion. Doctors are summoned and begin with what medicine demands: rule out the tangible. They test for pathogens and poisons, scan for environmental triggers, tally symptoms with clinical precision. Nothing infectious turns up. No toxin explains the geography. The pattern that remains points to mass psychogenic illness, a collective reaction to stress that expresses itself physically and spreads through social pathways. The mechanism is not imaginary. It is neurobiological. People, especially adolescents in tightly bonded groups, unconsciously copy visible signs of distress. A nervous system on the edge finds release where it can, and in Kashasha, that release took the form of laughter that felt like sobbing, and sobbing that sounded like laughter. Early investigators, including Rankin and Phillip in 1963, reached this conclusion after excluding organic causes. In 1964, the Ugandan psychiatrist Benjamin Kagwa reframes the outbreak in the language of post-colonial psychiatry, a mental conflict played out as bodily crisis. Decades later, the linguist Christian Hempelmann revisits the records and calls it a motor variant of mass psychogenic illness. No poison, no pathogen, only the fierce physics of suggestion and stress. One girl's laugh can ripple through dozens like falling dominoes, except the dominoes are human nervous systems primed by a changing world. To say stress is to name a symptom, not a cause. The cause lived in the air of a nation becoming itself. Independence arrived with a crest of pride and a trough of uncertainty. Families navigated new expectations as colonial structures loosened and local authority sought its footing. In mission schools, European discipline and examinations bore down on girls who were also daughters of villages with their own hierarchies and hopes. Teachers demanded focus, parents longed for advancement, students lived between languages and worlds. In that liminal space, traditional explanations did not vanish. They braided with modern anxieties. The Swahili phrase traveled mouth to mouth, Ndwara ya kucheka, the laughing trouble, and in some homes, elders connected the outbreak to spirits unsettled by rapid change. Meanwhile, psychiatrists saw a community struggling to absorb the weight of modernization. The laughter fit the social weather, a visible, audible signal of strain as a society tried to synchronize old loyalties with new demands. The laughter was not random. It mirrored a country caught between past and future, one body at a time. With distance and new tools, modern researchers go back over the files. Hempelmann's 2007 review in a humor research journal picks through the competing legends. There was no prank, no viral comedy, no chemical spill. The event was real and prolonged, but its engine was sociogenic. Other scholars situate Tanganyika alongside well-documented waves of mass psychogenic illness, from factory faintings to school outbreaks under exam pressure. The pattern repeats: a susceptible group under shared strain, a triggering display by one or a few individuals, and rapid social transmission aided by attention and anxiety. Historians widen the lens further, placing Tanganyika near older curiosities like the dancing plague of 1518, when crowds in Strasbourg danced until they collapsed. The details differ. The constant is the human tendency to move in each other's rhythms, even when those rhythms become harmful. Tanganyika is not an outlier, but a chapter in a larger story about how we broadcast stress and receive it back amplified. At the time, the world scarcely looked. Remote villages, a newborn nation, and an epidemic with no deaths make for thin headlines. The most careful attention comes from medical teams and missionaries who document what they can and move on. The outbreak recedes, and the country turns to nation building and, soon, union with Zanzibar to become Tanzania. Decades pass before the story re-enters the global imagination. In the 2000s, The Guardian runs a retrospective. Radiolab folds the tale into a medical mystery segment, and Atlas Obscura frames it as the most famous laughter epidemic on record. With each retelling, the outline is the same, and the temptation to embellish is strong. But the power of the story is not in spectacle. It is in the way an ordinary place at an extraordinary time became a mirror for the mind under pressure. What Tanganyika lived through now sits on syllabi and in sound bites, a case study in how communities carry invisible weight. If the vectors of 1962 were faces in a classroom and whispers in a dormitory, the vectors of today are feeds and for you. In 2011, a high school in New York saw dozens of students develop Tourette's-like tics that investigators linked not to toxins, but to stress and attention. A decade later, clinicians around the world reported sudden waves of similar functional tics among teens who had binged influencers' videos on TikTok. The physics is familiar: vulnerable individuals, social modeling, escalating reinforcement. Social media shortens the distance between trigger and echo. What once took months to ripple through villages can now spread across languages and borders in hours. Other echoes are more mundane, but no less telling. Mass fainting in schools under exam heat, runs on grocery staples prompted by rumor, panics that leap from phone to phone faster than any ambulance can drive. The Tanganyika epidemic is a caution without villains. We mirror each other's distress as easily as we mirror each other's jokes. Technology has not changed that truth. It has widened the mirror and brightened the glare. Today's outbreaks rarely shudder villages, but they can go viral worldwide before anyone recognizes the pattern. Every epidemic ends, whether by cure, by exhaustion, or by fading conditions. In Tanganyika, the laughter waned as the weather of stress shifted. Outbreaks grew shorter. Episodes became less frequent. Schools reopened and remained open. Families reclaimed routines. There was no miracle drug, no triumphant press conference. There was instead the slow recalibration of a region learning to breathe again. Doctors recorded their conclusions with reserve. Missionaries offered thanks. Villagers folded the memory into local language and moved forward. The quiet end fits the nature of the crisis. When the cause is social and psychological, the resolution is too. Remove enough pressure, disrupt the mimicry, restore some sense of control, and the behavior loses its fuel. If the trigger was a shared strain, the cure was a shared exhale. From the outside, the laughter epidemic looks like farce. From the inside, it reads like a ledger of pressure. A young nation changing shape, girls balancing the weight of parents' hopes, teachers' demands, and their own identities in formation. Communities translating upheaval into the language they knew. Physicians translating the same upheaval into the language of diagnosis. Strip away the mystery, and a deeper one remains. The human mind protects itself in ways that can terrify us. And when enough